With the market searching for certainty as much as it has in quite some time, the enticement of narratives is as strong as ever. This week we discuss the dangers and how to avoid them. So the danger of narratives. We've written about this, talked about this over 9 years of commentaries coming up on our 9th anniversary. A lot of times, and why. All of the power of narratives, of various fallacies, biases, always are acting on us as investors, trying to almost get us to take some form of a counterproductive action. The challenge is really twofold. First is our focus just has to go somewhere. We want to try to convince ourselves we're in more control of things than we are. And two, markets and investors as a product of that, they hate uncertainty. They want to try to, as Morgan Housel will talk about his book, The Psychology of Money again today, fill in the gaps to, again, convince ourselves we've got our hands around things, we understand what's going to happen, hopefully bring some measure of predictability into our lives. In chapter 18 of his book, he's got a great story around, again, the power of narratives. Stories are by far the most powerful force in the economy. They're the fuel that can let the tangible parts of the economy work, or the brake that can hold our capabilities back. And in the book, he shares a story about this mythical alien that comes down, not to say there are or there not, is looking at the economy in 2007, and he's looking at the economy from 2009. He's driving around, he's seeing the celebrations in Times Square at New Year's, he's seeing the new patents, the new technologies, and he assumes things must just be better. And of course, for those lived, let alone invested in that time frame, we know things were pretty broken at that point. Thus, again, those power of narratives. So this danger of narratives then manifests really in two important ways that, again, he calls out in his book. The first is really around belief. The more we want to believe something, the more we see it and filter facts to, again, support our case. You've probably heard that before. If we look at where we're at today, and we cautioned about this a little bit in last week's written commentary specifically, markets are looking for that certainty specifically around interest rates. It seems I can't start reading through the news that I'm not reading something about the recent data point and how the markets are going to spin it into a good news. So for one point, it was maybe good news in the fact that inflation was slowing. Now all of a sudden there's some bad economic data. The markets are interpreting that for the moment as being good, and again trying to read whatever they can read into the conclusion that they desperately want, which is to see the Fed announce planned rate cuts and hopefully with some rapidity. However, if you've been paying attention this year, you've seen, despite that belief, despite that kind of collective conviction in markets and the press, the data, the Fed's actions have been anything but. So 2 points here. One, again, is just being aware of that desire to try to find that certainty that really is just not a part of most investors' journey, or for that matter, most people's journey. And then two, just remembering how often, again, markets, the media have been wrong, and yet again, that's not critical for you being right as in terms of reaching your financial goals. The second one is false confidence, and this is what we see a lot of time. There, again, I think is this unspoken subconscious belief, hey, the more data I can input, I can finally have all the pieces to the puzzle. And again, Morgan Housel talks about this desire to fill in the gaps. What this does, the danger of narratives here, is really giving you a false confidence that, again, you can move forward with more certainty than you have. There's some commentators this week specifically talking about not only what a confusing time this is in the market in terms of various economic data, again, how the Fed might be interpreting that and what that means for their policy, but then the second thing is how much is priced into markets. And this is something that I see a lot of investors don't understand or forget, that again is kind of counterintuitive, which is how the markets are going to react is largely predicated on something that you can try to get your thumb on, but is pretty difficult, which is what are the expectations? So less bad can be better than good, which again, I think people find really confusing. It's all about what the expectation was, what the trend is, and where the markets what markets want to see as improvement. Now, certainly things can get to such extremes that absolutes matter, but most of the time it's a relative game. But again, being able to predict data and then accurately predict what the market might be feeling about that data or pricing in is why timing the markets is so difficult, if not impossible. So let's wrap up with some solutions. Number one, over and over, focus on what you can control, your plan, the framework with which you make financial decisions. When it's done right, we hear this time and time again from clients who say, I move forward on trust, but that has actually played out, is you get to release a ton of worries. One of my favorite stories representative of this was a client, and I said, what do we need to improve on for you? What are we doing right on that latter point? He said, one of my favorite parts about working with the firm is I come in from golfing with my buddies. They're all racing up to the screen to see what the stock market did. And I just know it doesn't impact my day-to-day. It doesn't impact my ability to take care of my family in retirement. And I've been able to let that go. And that was music to our ears. So again, focus on what we control. Done right, you again don't have to live with the whipsaw of narratives, the whipsaw of markets. Point number two is when to move. I've got some people say, well, if there's just nothing to be done, how do you even make a plan? Well, of course, there's things that need to be reallocated, mostly around your goals, your story, where you're at in life. But you know more times than not that you're having a proper reallocation when it's hard, not when you're going with the recent past, the mob mentality, the confirmation bias that people can have, that the past is going to repeat indefinitely. But when you're doing something hard, when you're in fact buying low, when you're doing something unpopular, more times than not, again, is going to be that type of reallocation that is going to get you on the right path. And finally, you need to know how to be wrong. If you can't predict the future, you can't move with perfection. And yet, perfection is not a requirement of investing. Proper planning, again, is, and as we've talked about, the two most sacrosanct parts of that are make sure you've understood your cash flow, whether that's from outside sources or your portfolio, and having proper liquidity to be able to buy yourself the time to let markets do what they're going to do. One of my favorite quotes that you see bandied about is the market can stay irrational much longer than most of us can stay solvent. It's with that kind of ethos, humility, that we need to approach our jobs as investors. If you need help with any of this, you want to talk through it, we're here anytime. Thanks so much.
Ten Capital is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors,